City Council ad hoc committee meeting for the 2020 Task Force, 6:15 Monday. We're going to start at 6:25, January 30th, 2012, in the caucus room, 3rd floor, City Hall. My name is Joe Calvo, and I'm the chairman of the committee. The mayor had appointed a leadership committee at the December meeting on a letter that he had posted, and I'm going to read that into the record. Honorable members of the City Council, City of Danbury, Danbury, Connecticut. Dear City Council members, I am expecting that the Danbury Public School 2020 Task Force will soon present a plan regarding the future needs of our school facilities. The task force is charged with studying of the Danbury Public Schools 5-year plan and identifying strategies for both long and short-term facility management, space analysis, and capital improvement planning. Since the 2020 plan will include recommendations for space and utilization needs of the Danbury Public School System, I am respectfully requesting an appointment of committee to review the recommendations and funding needs of the plan. We have brought together a fine group of talented and expertise for this challenging evaluation, and I am confident the committee will deliver a balanced assessment that honors the financial challenges of Danbury's taxpayers' ability to fund capital improvements and new education programs. Sincerely, Mark Bowden, Mayor of the City of Danbury. That came as item number 2 on the December agenda. And at that time, he appointed this ad hoc committee, which consists of myself, Majority Leader Greg Seabury, Majority Legislative Leader Jack Knapp, Minority Leader Tom Sadi, and Minority Legislative Leader Fred Visconti. There's also on that committee would be representative from the Mayor's Office, which will be the Mayor, Superintendent of School, which is here tonight, Dr. Pascarella, the Board of Ed Chair Gladys Cooper, who's here tonight with us, the Director of Finance, David St. Hilaire, Corporation Counsel, Les Pinter, who's here with us, Director of Public Works, Antonio Iadarola, and the Chair of the Task Force, Rusty Slavicki, who has not made it into the room that I know of yet. We're also joined tonight by Rich Delbert, who is the Director of Facilities for the Board of Education, Sites and Facilities. We have Dr. Glass with us here as well. We have Council ex officio Peter Nero, Ben Chinese, Paul Rotello, Colleen Stanley, Phil Kern, Shay Nairchef, and Mary Teicholz. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Since the mayor has not walked in the door, I think what I'll do is I'll ask Mr. Shane Hilaire if he would like to just start us in this process, and maybe we'll go to Mr. Iadarola and then down the line. So if you have input for us, we'd love to hear it. I know that our charge tonight's going to be slightly different. As the mayor know, I know our charge tonight's going to be slightly different than what was originally intended in the mayor's letter with the report. I think the task force has altered its direction slightly, and we're ready for you.
I apologize.
So we're going to do it again. Actually, we did all the introductions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to kind of brief everybody. Really, the purpose of this meeting is to update you regarding the status of what we've been working on, give you a little bit of a background in terms of how we got to this point, and then make a recommendation for the council meeting, which will be on February the 7th. Basically, the 2020 task force was really initially conceived by my office was really supposed to be a task force that would focus in on the long term, the long game, the big picture of where the schools were going, and really kind of trying to marry up programming with our facilities and how best to accommodate that. But over a period of really about 18 months, it's really morphed into a short-term and a long-term, because many of the long-term decisions are based on short-term decisions. And so what happened is that we ended up kind of not duplicating work, but getting into work that some of it had already been done by the Board of Education through their own facility study. Some of it had been done by the Savin report, which is this report that you hear about from time to time that was conducted with the engineering department, which is a report that Antonio and I conceived of back in '07 to really look at capital stuff. And then some of it has been done by the board itself, and then also by consultants that have looked at this. And essentially it boils down to this, that there is obviously a growing enrollment within our public school system. We're pretty cognizant of that fact. Where we ran into challenges was that there were a variety of different options that were offered to us by the consultants, and nobody had really nailed down exactly what we should do. And part of the problem is that this is an amorphous thing. It moves. And it's also sort of a domino game. When you move one piece here, another piece goes down. So it's not as easy as people think, and I think Antonio will tell you that it's not as easy as people think to nail down exactly how many kids are in every room, and when is this coming, and where is this coming. Part of this, from a historical perspective, is driven by the demographers really can't tell you more than about 3 years out with any certainty about what's going to happen. So if you have projections that lead out to 2020, they're frankly not really good until you get a little closer, and then you recalibrate those projections and see what happens. So to give you some perspective, in 2001 when I took office, we had reports that said we would be losing students at this point, and our discussion would be which schools are we going to shut down and how are we going to shrink the system. Well, obviously that hasn't happened. We also had, later on, there was an updated report that said, well, I had people telling me during the construction of Ellsworth Avenue School that we ought to not build the school. We wouldn't need it, and it would be cheaper not to build it. But we opted to take the middle ground and build the school because we obviously needed the space. So I guess my point is that the demographers, the consultants, it's not a science. They're never 100% certain about anything. And you could have 10% more kids than they tell you is coming, and you could have 30% less kids that's coming. You just don't know till they physically show up at the door and enroll. So with that in mind, we took all the data that had been collected, and if I'm going on too long, Mr. Chairman, just go. We took all the data that had been collected. We then, Antonio and I sat down, huddled in our office for 2 or 3 days, trying to make some heads or tails out of the data of how many students are coming, where are they coming, and we really kind of came to one realization, that all the consultants had sort of different ideas about how to resolve this problem, that we needed to understand what the real true capacity of our schools were. And once we understood what the capacity of our schools are now, we would then be able to make some decisions about what to do going forward. But it doesn't make any sense if you don't know how many you can actually accommodate. And because we have, half a dozen schools that are bursting at the seams, we have other schools that are not quite as full as them, it really becomes a real challenge. And Antonio, and he can speak more to this, but came down to the idea of, let's get a team of engineers, let's take all the data we have, let's go out and physically inspect each building, let's meet with each principal, let's understand, obviously Bill and Dr. Cascarella are a big part of this conversation. They've been meeting in the office with us simultaneously, so we can understand how do they use the buildings, how does the program use the building, and then come up with a plan, if you will, that we think will accommodate this projected enrollment increase. So with that, we have a plan, but we're not looking at financing it. I'm going to throw it over to Antonio with your permission, Mr. Chairman, in a minute. But we're not looking to finance that in April. We are, though, going to need some dollars to begin our due diligence work, our engineering and our architectural work for some of the renovations that we're going to describe to you. And the best way I can put it is, we could say we want to add an addition to pick a school, Shelter Rock School, but if we don't do test borings and we don't know any geotechnical data about the ground out there, we may not be able to add anything on there. So I didn't feel comfortable going to the voters saying, yeah, I'm gonna put 5 classrooms here, and 3 classrooms there, and 10 there, without knowing if the building could accommodate it, if we had enough room for all that. And that's what we need, that seed money to begin. Once that's been done, and they'll have all spring, actually, we'll be working on it all spring, we'll file what's called DDO 49 by June 30th. We'll then go to the voters in November at the presidential election, which I thought would be good because that's the most optimum amount of people out voting. About 85% of registered voters vote in the November election in the presidential year. And we would obviously get, the plan approved and then begin the process. So with that, Antonio, he's got real specific and details, so I thought I'd turn it over to him to kind of fill in some of the blanks. But I'm just trying to give you the big picture of where our thoughts are.
If I could, just before you start, Mr. Adderall, with the record, please reflect, Mr. Sadi is out of town on military duty, hoping to be here, if he can get out, relieved, and get here from his post, and Mr. Seabury is out of town on family business. I meant to say that when I did all the introductions, so. Okay, Mr. Adderall, you're on.
Thank you. One of the key things in really determining what your needs are is to understand what your capacities, your existing capacities are. And every consultant had taken a different approach in determining what the ultimate capacity of each and every one of our school is. So we came up with a format that basically standardized a use or the school uses so they were somewhat even across the board. One of the things we looked at is we felt that it was critical, even after speaking with the superintendent and his staff, also meeting with some of the principals and some of the specialty teachers, that every school have an art, music, an ESL, a language arts room, a speech, and a resource room. So one of the things we did is we created a capacity based on the fact that every school will have these supplemental rooms. These are rooms above and beyond the classrooms that ultimately will tell you how many kids you can fit in a school. So we figured that was a good way to approach getting our existing capacity, and we thought it was a fair way to equalize what is happening right now across many of the schools. Some schools don't have art and music. Some schools have art and music and a couple other classrooms that are basically free. So we thought we standardized it and every child had the same opportunity in every school. We did the same thing with our elementary. What I spoke about before was primary, and then we have the elementary. So having said that, we did visit several schools. We met with every single principal. We had every principal identify, come to a meeting. It was an all-day meeting. They identified how each one of their classrooms was being used, what was in it, the class sizes, their current enrollment, and then we ultimately came up with what we thought was an existing capacity for each one of those schools. So once we came up with that, we felt pretty confident that after evaluating the other capacity studies that were done in the format that we took this study on, we really felt we had probably done maybe a better job than most consultants had done, because we were specifically looking at the programs, each school, and then equalizing these opportunities across the district, which is something that really hadn't been done before. So we came up with these space utilization numbers. We compared them to what the enrollment projections were, not only in the next couple of months, or I should say into the upcoming year, and we compared them to what actually will be, we call it a bulge. A lot of people have called it a lot of different names, but it's basically the highest projected enrollment based on the study that was conducted and that we received on June 11th, 2012. This was the last piece.
January 11th.
January 11th, yep, January 11th.
That's the
2012.
last best data we have.
This was the last piece of data that really kind of gave a projection on which way our enrollment was going.
Just to note that the gentleman, the demographer, also did the March 23rd, 2010, so we had him do a comparison so that we had the
So
real
March
numbers
and
there.
January.
Well, that's
Yeah.
010.
This was
Right.
010,
Right.
Right.
and then we had him come back to reconfirm because of the variances.
So, having said all of that, and programming these schools where every child has every opportunity for these other supplemental classrooms, having an art class, having a music class, we quickly saw where some of our, if you will, school overcrowding was occurring. Although some of my charts, when you look at it, in theory, will show you that there's a lot of capacity, we all know that there's no effective way to fully utilize every square foot in a classroom. And what I'm saying is, our capacity are based on multiplying a contract number that each teacher can have in the classroom by how many classrooms there are and coming up with a capacity. Fact of the matter is you can't fully program every classroom to have 22 kids or 25 kids in it. It just doesn't work that way in each grade level. So what we did then is we took a look at what we felt was a comfortable school and what the utilization was, and we found that somewhere between 92 to 95% utilization of the total square footage was actually a pretty nice number. I then, just to kind of verify this information, I took a look at the requirements that the State Department of Education has for building a new school. And I took a look at the square footage that we have in some of these schools. I took a look at how many kids are in that school, and ever I got within 95%, I checked that number against the state requirements, and I found that I actually came in very close. So I know that the 92 to 95% utilization isn't a gross misuse of square footage. It actually comes in perfectly with what the state recommends you should build based on that population. So that was just a secondary check that I did. So kind of knowing what population we had to accommodate, we then sat back and said, well, what do? Do we buy an existing building? Do we try to convert that existing building into additional schools, knowing there is a tremendous cost to actually bring in a brand new school online? There's separate administrators, there's a bunch of other things that really come to light. And then once you actually build these schools and you build this building, you have a standalone building that ultimately, if the population drops, as the mayor says, you get these strong variation in these projections. It would be a tough school to deal with. It would be whether you eliminate it or partially occupy it, lease it. So it became very complicated. And the other thing that we found is there really isn't a lot of, although people say there isn't really a lot of commercial space that is adaptable in converting it to a school. And most people that have commercial space that's available for sale think their property is worth fortunes. So that was the other thing that we came up with. So we sat with Sal and Mr. Glass, and we thought about how do we deal with this and give ourselves the most flexible expansion plan for not only today but the future. And one of the things that we all came up with was basically a sister school program, creating sister schools that are very close geographically that could easily swing children if these projections are terribly wrong and we have a problem. The other thing we did is we created small additions to these sister schools, so we weren't really bringing on a brand new school. We were utilizing some of the existing heating and ventilating systems. We weren't creating new playgrounds. We weren't creating a lot of new parking. We had to add a little bit of parking. So all of a sudden, the efficiencies of doing this and quickly came to light, very, very quickly. So we definitely knew that it gave us flexibility. It provided for the academic requirements that Sal and some of his staff were looking for. It equalized the educational opportunities across the district, and it provided us the most cost-effective way to move forward with this overcrowding issue that we have today. So having said that, we all pulled together and we created 3 clusters of sister schools, which basically accommodates the elementary population and the primary schools. We have, I think, 2 primaries, right? 2, yeah. So the first sister cluster was Park Avenue, Morris Street, and Mill Ridge Primary. Again, you see they're all somewhat inner city schools. They're all very closely related to each other. And we quickly looked at what struggles each one of these schools had and what opportunities the actual facilities provided. And what we found was that Park Avenue actually had an opportunity for expansion, and that will have to be further analyzed once we bring the architect on board. But it had the available land, it had some other opportunities that some of the other schools didn't. Morris Street, as you know, is in a completely built-out site. There's really no room there for any additions. You can't really go up. So Morris Street, we definitely knew was not going to be an opportunity. There is some opportunity at Mill Ridge Primary, but again, we're trying to do the expansion in one site to keep the construction costs down. And we felt Park Avenue really was a core. It was a perfectly centrally located school that could really facilitate any bulging that the other two sister schools may have in the future, should these projections not work out. The next sister cluster was Shelter Rock, South Street, and Ellsworth. And then the third one was Stadley Ruff, Great Plain, and Haystown. So our goal is, although we have some preliminary ideas of where to actually do the expansion for these three sister clusters, we want to hire an architect to actually look at life safety, look at the size of the actual cafeteria and the gyms, and look at some of the site restrictions to see what is the most cost-effective approach in each one of these clusters to expand. Again, I have an idea of what I think works just from the, couple of weeks of walking through the schools, looking at the footprint of the schools, looking some life and safety issues at the school. That is what we're going to have this architectural firm study, help us study, and once they give us the go-ahead and they say that this is the most feasible way to expand, we're going to put together by June 30th, we're going to put together an application to the state for the actual project, to actually secure a project number. And by that time, I'll have some preliminary drawings, I'll have some preliminary construction estimates, and those are all the items that I need in order to move forward with the state. The bulging that's occurring is coming quick, and we're starting to actually see what is actually projected over the next 3 years is actually already starting to hit. Some schools are a little bit ahead of where we thought they were going to be, so they're definitely there. And as the mayor said, 3 to 5 years is really a comfortable range for some of these projections. Going out to 2020, which is what the study does, I wouldn't be going and build schools based on a 2020 bulge. I would kind of hold off on that. But time is of the essence, just because there is a June 30th requirement. Once we get the applications into the state, then prior to the end of the year, the legislative body will actually vote on funding our projects, and by that time, we actually have to show that we're ready to fund these projects internally in the city of Danbury. That's why the referendum in November is critical, and then it just picks up speed from there. We will then develop design drawings, we will then bid it out, and then we will quickly try to implement the construction, so when the hard population that's coming our way hits, we'll have the space for these children. And the nice part about it is, by actually planning these expansions now, what it does with the school district is gives them an opportunity now to program kids to a specific school. So there isn't going to be a large redistricting that's going to be required. This will be a very easy, well-planned way of getting the children into the schools that have the capacity. Some pocket redistricting might be necessary within the next year and a half. The Board of Education's already looked at that, and it's really not going to be upsetting the overall population of these three cluster schools that we've just talked about. So in a nutshell, I think I covered everything. If there's any questions, gladly put them on the table. I'll try to answer them for you.
I think we then would kind of want to migrate over to the middle school. So the next issue is, okay, you got the, assuming all this works out just the way we planned, then the next challenge you have is what do you do with those kids who get older and now go to middle school? Now we know we clearly have 2 middle school buildings that are at or near capacity. And our plan there was to then utilize Mill Ridge Intermediate School as a annex to our middle school programs. They would house 2 middle schools academies. One would be the STEM Academy, which is currently housed at Rogers Park. We would move that out of Rogers Park, backfill that with students to lower those numbers down to more manageable numbers for staff there. And then we would like to have an extension of the magnet school, the AISC, the magnet school at Western, where we have grades 6, 7, and 8, so that kids would be seamless from K through 8 in that program. So that's kind of how we envision that building. There are some renovations that have to take place at that building, so part of this dollar amount that we'll ask for will pay for the engineering and architecturals to scope out what we'll need to have in that building to be able to accommodate those kids as well. It's all, again, kind of a domino where you're constantly moving pieces around to make sure that the kids have there, and that'll take us out to about 2017, 2018. But then you're gonna have a problem at the high school around 2019, 2020.
2020, yeah.
And that's a whole nother discussion. So the 2020 task force, which is on the other side of this, they're not gonna end with this project moving forward. They're gonna continue to work on really phase 2, which is, okay, now what do we do with those kids? And in general, what do we want high school education to look like? Dr. Pasquarella and Dr. Glass have some really neat ideas about that. And, we've had, I think, some really interesting conversations on how we want that to look. But that's the next phase of this. Right now, we've got to take care of what's in front of us. That's the elementary schools, and then secondly, the middle school. And then we go towards the high school.
Thank you. Dr. Sal?
Well, we've been dealing with it for 3 years, and I think that the real question was, do you really believe the numbers? And we waited until the numbers are actually here. So we really just did a progression by grade, and that's been just the evidence. So we've exceeded what the demographer has said in certain situations. The oddity of what's happening, the dilemma is that between the birth, when they calculate this, they do birth and then they do migration, they call it. There's migration within the city. We expected more students at I think it was South Street, and that went down 40, 50 to find out that they migrated over to Morris Street. So there's different patterns for housing that's creating this flux, which caused transportation issues, as you can well appreciate. But starting this, the middle school really is in need. We had the STEM Academy we put in 2 years ago. That was to balance Broadview, which was growing at a greater rate. And we did that so that it would be an education purpose to move. And now it's worked, but they're both about 1130. And they're projected to be over 1,300. And that is a challenge at those levels. So the middle school idea of Mill Ridge was something that was discussion a few years ago when we closed it for, really was funding issues when we looked at it critically. So we think that what we need is a middle school that will house, we feel, around 550, 600 kids that will bring it down. So that'll be, but what goes in there, the board's gonna have to decide with the education specs. And as Mark said, this is the conversation that we've had, be some type of magnet very possibly. And the board would have to decide that. The elementary, we started the sister school this year. I went back about 15 years ago and I looked at the work that was done, and I just built on that work and basically looked at boundaries, looked at areas that were natural. So this configuration would operate. The only thing we didn't do from the studies, they said you should look at this every 5 years. I think the last time we looked at it was 15 to move people around, really. There used to be a swing area in the Shelter Rock area that they used to move about 30, 35 kids. So given this in 3 years, right now we're using all of the classrooms. I think the challenge was, you go in some schools at 110% occupancy using, other schools are less, but they're using the stage, the cafeteria, and other breakout areas because of the new rules and regulations on how we have to work with our groups of students. So I think if the town looks at this and does a good study, and we're able to expand in those pocket areas, what it should do is return our programming back to the way it should be in the schools and not overtax the schools so that they're offering a quality program. So we have space in all of our schools to accommodate for good educational experiences for our kids. So, you know, I'm looking forward to this study. Bill, educationally, we're looking at the programming in there in terms of where we're gonna go, but and I know he's been working with the principals about, well, what do we do if with the middle school? The elementary is just building out. It's really just taking and creating some more classrooms, taking back our math, taking back our music, our art classes, and taking kids out of hallways and closets and corner spaces and things of that nature, and getting them back in the classrooms. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Dr. Pasquale. Who do we want to go to? Want to talk about dollar amount, what we're looking for tonight? And Dr. David about?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I could have not had a 2020 meeting, just put a request on the, on the agenda for the money, but we also want to take this opportunity to brief you guys on what our work that we've done and where we are and what the process is. So right now, coming out of the committee, we would look for a recommendation of $100,000 out of contingency to see this work, and that would be for engineers, architectural work, so we can put everything ready for the state in June, and then obviously so we can get to the voters, which is very important in this climate. I'm very concerned about the referendum potentially not passing, given people's concern, about their own personal financial situation, rightly so. We need to have as tight numbers as we possibly, within reason, as we can have in November to say it's going to be X dollars and to take care of the work we have to have. I mean, that's a tremendous, tremendous concern for us. The other concern, which is really tremendous, is future years is operational costs, because if you build a new building, you've got to staff the building, you've got to hire teachers, you've got to hire principals, you've got to hire nurses, and depending on the size of the building, how many kids you're servicing, you could easily go add another $2 million a year to the Board of Ed budget, not counting electricity, gasoline, everything else that goes up as well. So, we have to keep an eye on terms of what those operational dollars are, and that's one of the reasons why we thought this was the most cost-efficient and really fairest way to go about doing this.
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Rotello and then Mrs. Cooper.
Through the chair, just a couple of quick ones. If Antonio could...
Can you stand back here for
Sure.
1 second? We're changing the tape. I did ask the clerk to record that Mr. Shai arrives at 6:40.
Antonio, you mentioned Park Avenue. Did you mean to say that Park Avenue, of the three schools, it was a little triangle there, would be the only school to get the construction, or the other ones would get increases for art and things like that? And Park Avenue would be much more expanded for the additional classrooms? I wasn't quite clear on that.
Yeah, in each one of the clusters, there's 3 sister schools in each of the 3 clusters, and one of them would be programmed for an expansion. Park Avenue would be what we're currently looking at as taking on the majority of the expansion for that sister cluster. If we can't fully expand that school to meet our needs, then what we looked at as a backup plan for that cluster is possibly doing a secondary expansion at Mill Ridge Primary. So that's what the architect's going to be looking at.
Okay, so it might be possible that Park Avenue is the only school that
It
gets
might be in that cluster.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
And also, for those of us who went to school in the 70s, we fondly remember portable classrooms. I'm guessing you looked at that and rejected it?
Yeah, well, they're not funded by the State Department of Education anymore. And, we're finding, I just spent a lot of time at the state. I actually got them to really approve a concept which is much like a modular, but it is a permanent construction, much better construction quality. And the state just allowed us to actually use this. We just got the commissioner's approval on it. So, very cost-effective construction, very quick, but it is qualifiable for reimbursement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton. Ms. Cooper?
Just to clarify a few questions, that I want to make sure of is that we're talking about the addition of 17 classrooms. And I'm going to run down the numbers that I sort of was given. We're going to have 5 classroom addition at Shelter Rock. We're going to have 8 addition at Park Avenue, 4 addition at Great Plain. Okay? And with those addition comes the speech room, the resource room, the language art, and the art. Am I correct so far?
That is right.
Okay. And then we're going to
Actually,
go.
whoa, no. I mean, we're not committing to
Yeah.
any specific amount of rooms anywhere. We
Okay.
don't know that. That's why we're appropriating this money tonight, so we can go and do a study. You may not get, for example, Gladys, I think you said, how many, just give me one at Shelter Rock, you said.
On Shelter Rock, it would be 5 addition.
Maybe you only get 4 there.
Okay.
And you may have to add another one somewhere else.
Okay,
All right?
okay.
And we're not committing to 17 classrooms. I'm not sure how that number got floated out there.
This is why I'm asking, so I can get the
Right.
clarification.
I mean, that a lot of that's dependent on what the site conditions are that were out there and to determine how we do that.
Okay,
Now, how each individual room, what we did is we said every classroom, every building should have the following: an art room, a music room, resource like Mr. Idrola had mentioned. Given the, as a common template, okay? So every building should have that. So these classrooms, you can't look at them and say, well, you know, that means that Shelter Rock will be able to reclaim their art room and their music room, no question about that. But those rooms aren't specifically for those uses.
Okay.
They're generic classrooms that may get used that way, but the staff member and the BOE may decide that, no, we don't need that, we're gonna reclaim our old one.
okay,
I just want it, so every building will have those core classrooms.
okay,
All right.
okay.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I-
understand that better.
Yeah, I just want to add on to something.
Okay.
As diligent as we have been in communicating to everyone that although this seems, putting 8 classrooms at Park Avenue is what we would like to do, ultimately, as we dig the holes and we look at what the soil conditions are, as we determine what some of the underground utilities are, there's a high-pressure gas main on one side of Park Avenue, which I know we can't use. That actual distribution of classrooms within that cluster may change a little bit. The dynamics and the landscaping of those classroom distributions may change. So it's very important, and I'm so glad you brought that up tonight, because none of what we spoke about tonight is really locked in stone. The distribution of those classrooms within these 3 clusters will vary, and we won't fully know it until the actual study is completed, which will be in a couple months.
But that's the vision.
Yeah, that's the vision
General,
is,
That's the vision.
yeah, yeah.
That clustering allows efficiency of transportation too, and should also keep us, which is a concern of all of us, the Office of Civil Rights. We have a requirement of where we have to stay within our balance. So, you know, contiguous lines, drawing it all should help, not exacerbate a problem by relocating down here and then having to cut other areas up just to meet some prescribed numbers. So this should help in that area as well.
Mrs. Cooper, you still have the floor. Do you want to continue? Mrs. Cooper?
Oh, no, I'm finished.
That was a question, okay.
Yes.
Senator Glass, I saw you put your hand up.
Just a quick point of clarification, because as Antonio has repeatedly said during our meetings, you know, a little bit of information gets out, and it's like the game of telephone. By the time it's done, we're building 40 schools. The thought around Millridge Intermediate is to take our 300-student STEM program currently housed over at Rogers Park, which is an intra-district magnet school drawing students from Broadview and Rogers Park out. That's when Sal said we could draw down 150 kids from each building and move that to Millridge. The other piece, though, is AIS is an inter-district, as you all know, for many towns around us. This would not continue that model. It would just be Danbury students, and they would not have to go to the K-5 magnet school in order to be able to be eligible for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school, be open enrollment.
So you could, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I just want to make it clear. So you could, if you were a parent of a 6th grader, apply to that school. So it's the same concept, same curriculum. There may be Danbury kids that opt to continue through into grade 6 from AIS, but also there may be somebody that wasn't in that program at all that decided to get in. It's an open enrollment system. And the out-of-town students would not be accommodated, mainly because we are required to have a 70-30, 60-40 split, and we would eat up too much of our space trying to accommodate that when we've got to bleed off numbers from the other 2 middle schools. So, Mary Bill?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sadi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair, well, to the mayor, Antonio, or Dr. Pascarella, there are multiple tracks that we're all trying to proceed on. And one of the main things that's very important about this ad hoc committee is the fact that people are getting the information now in real time. We're all getting the information from the same sources, and to try and avoid the confusion that's been out there. That being said, and you know, the mayor has highlighted this and others have, that the 2020 task force wasn't meant initially as a space utilization task force. But now what we're discussing here is a study regarding possible construction or expansion, some limited redistricting, moving STEM and magnet school program to possibly to MRI. I know the deadline, I think Antonio pointed this out, the deadline is June 30th to get a plan to the state, so to get the information back from, if we go forward with hiring a consultant, an architect, an engineer, or a combination thereof. With regard to the other elements of this, I don't want to call it a plan, but these ideas of the limited redistricting as well as the movement to possibly to MRI or STEM, are there deadlines or internal deadlines, I know there's not statutory ones, as to whether or not those are going to happen or a decision's going to be made on those, sort of in tandem with the deadline of the construction issue. Around June or July, we're going to need to know where we're going construction-wise. And so I put that, I guess, to the three gentlemen here.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the reasons why we want the seed money, so we can really begin, like tomorrow or the minute the council meets, to begin scoping out the work. We just want to make sure before we go to the voters that if we say, like Ms. Cooper said, there's 6 classrooms going at Park Avenue, that there's 6 classrooms going there, not 3, because that's where that miscommunication and people don't quite understand. So by June 30th, you'll have a complete breakdown of what we're going to do in all these schools, and then we can spend the summer really doing plans. Whatever's left over, we can try to get a heads up a little bit on a lot of the site work that will have to be done, a lot of the preparations that we'll have to do in anticipation for a positive outcome in November. So by June 30th, we need to secure a job number from a project number from the state. It means we've really got to have everything wired up pretty tight in terms of what's possible at each of these buildings, what we intend on doing.
For us, Tom, we've been looking at the what ifs. What if we create another middle school? What would it look like? I think early up, we decided it wouldn't be a traditional middle school, but different. That different being the magnet setting. So they've been working with principals about what it would look like. The idea of having 2 magnets at one has been intriguing because it just is able to offer a lot more to our constituents. But Bill's been working on that. It'll go to the board for ed specs. That's down the road in terms of the utilization. The other one I think is the most challenging, perplexing would be any redistricting. We did a redistricting, and we made recommendations to the board that we'd stay within our sister school format where students will be going at particular grade levels. And there were a few schools where we have some space. We see that as continuing. As soon as they determine what would work here, the ace in the hole I think the town of Danbury has is when we build the school here for Mr. Maloney's group, you now have Millridge Intermediate available with open classrooms. We have 7 classrooms there of our preschool program. There are 28 classrooms there. Depending on when construction starts, we could use as our swing space.
Just in case.
Yeah, which is a thing that, we've never had here. Ellsworth got knocked down and we had nowhere to swing other than, go rent, which is pretty expensive. So that will come into that we didn't have there. So we'll have to see what happens. And then for next year, we don't see any great problem. But if something should happen unexpected, the only thing we have that we hadn't had in the past would be possibly something at Mill Ridge. So we're set up for next year unless something unusual happens at this point.
Any follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sadi?
Segueing off that, obviously, logically, any redistricting plan would have to be based on where the classrooms are going to be, so you couldn't start that really until the construction was decided. Not done, but decided.
Right.
And then that redistricting, if it was based on more rooms, couldn't be in place or couldn't be done or effectuated until those rooms are actually there. But, so that means that the one thing you mentioned, Dr. Pasquarello, about the sister school program or partner school, however they're called, that obviously that would have to continue for some time. But, and I don't want to get your words incorrect here, but are you saying that even with the new construction, you would still be hesitant with redistricting and trying to keep
Well-
sister school? Or that with new construction, potentially redistricting could work and eliminate this sister school program?
It's probably a bridge,
Okay.
is what I'm saying. I think the bridge is gonna be comprised of redistricting, and then within the redistricting, if something unusual and you need more space, we have, the town of Danbury now has this other school with open space that we could then utilize for moving programs around, which would be very helpful. So, you know, we need the bridge to get to these new buildings.
If I could interject, I think the question that I'm asking is not necessarily what we do next year or the year after. Is the sister school program kind of going to stay in place? I think the answer to that is yes, but I understand what your concern is because we've had conversations about this, so I can put everybody together here. The problem that we've seen is that you have one student go to, say, Shelter Rock and another student go to South Street, in the same family. And that I think is something for the board would want to look at in terms of a policy of not splitting up families in terms of.
That's the policy the board has used in the programs and in the past.
And your other issue is that families need certainty as to where their children are going. When we're all done, you'll have certainty as to where you go. Where the sister school comes up is when a student shows up, September 20th, and we never even knew they were in the city, and our grade 5 is filled at Shelter Rock, then we're gonna have to, send them to South Street. Or our grade 5 is filled at Morris Street, but we've got space at Park Avenue. And part of our problem is we're dealing with almost a 40% mobility rate, where students move through the year, where they finish one grade in 1 year, and then they go to another school in our district the next year. So you can never plan on grade 4 is gonna look like what grade 3 looked like, because you could have 30 more kids show up for grade 4. Part of that is where Antonio was talking about the utilization, where if our contract says we can take 22 kids in the room, I can't guarantee Pembroke School they're gonna have, 22 kids in that 3rd grade classroom. They may have 20, they may have 18, but they may have 26 show up. And there may only be 18 at 5th grade. So that's really why you can never get the full utilization of all your buildings the way you want to. It's just not practical. But I only know this because I've talked to the councilman about this. Families will have certainty as to where their child goes year in, year out. Now, if they just pop up in the middle of the year, they may have to go to, instead of going to Park Avenue, they may end up at MRP or something like that. But they wouldn't bother them because that's where they started and that's where they finish.
And that answers some of the question, but just as a concern, if I may continue, Mr. Chairman, just to communicate to the superintendent as well as to the chairwoman of the board that, and this may be an oversimplification of the redistricting issue, and I understand that sister school program may be necessary when you do have this sort of overflow or crowding issue, even if there is new construction. But that adjustments on the margin, the certainty that I live in a neighborhood that is, my street is 2 streets or 3 streets over from a particular school, but because I moved in there after the school now is filled, my child is gonna be going 20, 25 minutes away in the school bus rather than the school that all their friends on the street go to. So the neighborhood school concept where, again, I apologize for oversimplification, but when you redistrict and you move the line, you're not taking students from deep inside a district and bringing them somewhere else, but you're taking people who are closer to that sister school and just drawing them into it, as opposed to plucking people out who are new from another district. I just wanted to communicate that concern. That's a concern that's been communicated to me. I think people have gone to the Board of Education and communicated that to the board, both the old and the new members as well.
If I could just add into that, Mr. Chairman, I don't think the sister school program that Antonio's talking about is a little bit different than what's currently practiced.
Well, then that's important to understand the difference.
So I think there'll be certainty as to where you go. Again, our only challenge is because there's so much mobility. You look at South Street, look at Morris Street this year. South Street way underperforming where we thought we'd have kids. Morris Street's burst at the seams. And that's due just for people moving within the city. That's hard to, there's no certainty for them at all. I mean, that's not, but if you've lived on Jones Street for, 5 years and now your son or daughter is getting ready to go to whatever school that Jones Street goes to, you'll know that that's where you go. And that won't, you won't be told at the beginning of the year, you gotta go somewhere else.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that it seems this proposal is a good blend of what we've been hearing. You know, ideas from the task force, ideas from the council, PTO, mayor, the administration, everybody coming together. A blend of construction, as well as put some limited redistricting, and then some of the other moving parts of the magnet school being combined, programs up at MRI. Well, as the mayor highlighted, trying to limit completely standalone new structures that require additional operational expenses as opposed to sort of making more room available at currently operating facilities. So, and getting information out there has been key because, as others have said, it's become very confusing for some people.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Kern?
Mr. Mayor, I guess through the chair, what timeline, optimistically, what are we looking at? Are we looking at September 13?
That's a great question, Councilman, and we didn't really touch timeline. Here's sort of how we have it sketched out. Understanding that, you know, there's always contingencies with construction and with paperwork, particularly at the state level. We have our stuff together here. I'm always concerned about what happens up there. But generally, and Antonio, just chip in from that, our goal is to complete the Head Start building by some point this fall. Now, we're not going to do the move with Mr. Maloney this fall. We'd like to do a mid-year move, like a January of 2013 move from out of MRI over to here. That'll give we know next fall we're going to be in okay shape. Not great shape, but okay shape with all the population. But that'll give Dr. Pasquarello some options, particularly if kids come in the spring of 2013 and the fall of 2013. So once we effectuate that move, that pretty much empties up Millridge Intermediate. We hope to get going right away once our documents are all scoped out and drawn up and contracts signed. Work at Millridge, you know, by the end of the summer or the beginning of the middle of the summer, depending how that goes. As far as the elementary schools, Antonio, we're looking at we just talked about it the other day, but we're looking at positive vote by the voters in November. All winter, we would use that time to put our plans together and our scoping and final documents for bidding.
June 2014 is when we anticipate state approval of our drawings. And
Right. The
2014?
That's correct.
Right. I mean, this is really, I mean, you have to plan out this far in advance to get this stuff done. And we look for an occupancy of, what are you looking for, Antonio, on the
Well,
elementary end?
August of 2015, which is really the key. That's really when the projections hit for this bulge.
Right, so you'd break ground at some point in 2014.
And this would be the worst as far as time frame. If we get through the state a little quicker, there's not a lot of communities building schools. Obviously, this will pick up, and we would look at building these out as quickly as we can. We would not wait for the bulge to actually hit in 2015. We would try to turn over the space to Dr. Sal as quickly as possible.
And they're gonna wanna shake down the space and, you know, do all the planning they need to do for their programming on that end, so we're gonna wanna move on it.
Mr. Knapp?
Yeah, question to you, Mr. Idarola. The schools that Ms. Cooper mentioned earlier, which was Shelter Rock, Great Plain, and what was the other one?
Park
Park Avenue. Are those the only schools that we're considering expanding on? As far as the $100,000 that we're gonna do the
Yeah,
architectural
no,
design
that's
for?
not true. No.
Okay.
That is the beginning of where we're gonna start. But what ultimately will happen is every single school within the 3 clusters will be looked at for efficiency and utilization of the grounds, and that's really what we'll be looking at. Preliminarily, because we have to communicate something, at this point, we would be looking at expanding Park Avenue, Shelter Rock, and Great Plain. What may actually come out of this study is completely different.
Those are our first choice.
Right.
As long as the engineers, the architects say, looks good, we can fit X amount of classrooms here, there's no major gas lines or sewer lines, or no other contingencies for construction, then that would be what we prefer, being that there's enough land there to be able to do what we need to do. They may come back though and say, you can't do this one, you can do these 2. And then we would have to, you know, move that around. That's why we just want to be careful that this money they'll tell us exactly where to do this.
Okay.
But that's sort of the idea.
With this money that we're talking about, recommending tonight, beyond those 3 schools, we're talking about the Millridge school also that this study's gonna be done at?
That's
So-
correct,
so we got all included.
converting that converting that to a middle school.
I'm just trying to clarify
Yeah,
what
that's
schools
correct.
we're appropriating this money
And,
for.
Mr. Chair, just so we're clear, I want to be clear, it's not really a study, we've studied this thing to death, we know what we have to do. We're a little bit beyond that, we're to the point where we're gonna bring in engineers that do school construction, say, can we add 6 classrooms here? And they'll, I guess you'd call it a study, but they'll do all the testing.
Pre-engineering.
It's pre-engineering, I guess is the best way to
Can you
say it.
tie in the mechanical? Can you tie in
Exactly.
the parking lot? Can you
Well,
tie
we
in
look at the
underground
cafeteria.
utilities? and- Right.
No, we studied this bad boy to death. At least I think I did.
Mr. Cheney?
Through the chair to Dr. Sal. As we've been discussing this regarding the completion date of being August 2015, what's the plan now for the next 2 years? Because now you're going to talk 2 full years under the old system. Are there any plans for the space now, for portable classrooms or such? How are you going to handle the overcrowding now?
Well, there's no plan for modules. The plan we have now is to, we created the partner schools for next year, and we would roll that out. The thing that I said before that we have would be the use of Mill Ridge Intermediate if we really get into a problem in terms of space. That's the other thing. And we have some schools that are still open where they're not utilizing all of their special rooms that we'd have to look at, if worse comes to worse, in that respect. So for next year, we should be fine. And the year after, we'll have to see how the enrollment goes next June to make a determination if we have to expand the partner school and do something else.
And at that point, we'll have Mill Ridge Intermediate available, so if we need a few swing classrooms.
That's the big thing.
Right, 5 or 6 classrooms will be available.
We added buses next year in order to accommodate some of the swing space that we had, which will be helpful. So what might happen the year after, if we have a little more swing, we may have to add another bus. That's what will get us around, to get us to this bridge, is the hope at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Sal. Anybody else? Mr. Mayor? Sure.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to recommend the resolution adopting the recommendations of the 2020 Task Force on Schools, including the authorization and funding a feasibility study for possible renovations and improvements to school facilities. This funding not to exceed $100,000.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by Mr. Sadi. Any discussion with the committee?
Chairman, just to speak to the motion, we did have a resolution prepared for tonight, we do have a draft to see what the committee decided tonight. The resolution will basically be sort of the first dot on the map, indicating that the committee recommends the receipt of the 2020 Task Force report, embark on the feasibility study, and subject to certification by the Director of Finance, certify whatever amount of money you agree to authorize. So that's what the
We'll have that
resolution
all
will
for
say.
the
That'll be
February.
ready in the morning for the
February.
city clerk.
You know what, Mr. Chairman, if we could take the 2020 piece out of this, only because they're not meeting till next Monday. We're gonna need this money, should they, regardless, it frankly doesn't matter, but I prefer if we just leave that section of it, so the resolution just would say to recommend,
We recommend the authorization of
Just
$100,000 from contingency to the planning study, engineering study.
they haven't finished their report, I don't wanna.
Are you okay with that, Mr.? Yeah?
Yep.
You okay with those changes, Mr. Sadi?
Yes, consider friendly.
Alrighty. Any discussion of the committee members? Seeing none, I'll try your minds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, ayes have it unanimously. I have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Visconti, seconded by Mr. Sadi. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your effort.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Rory Duraco with the Danbury Police Department. We're asking you to please refrain from using your handheld electronic device while operating your motor vehicle. This has caused citizens property damage, personal injury, and loss of life. So please, when you're operating your motor vehicle, keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, not on your phone. Thank you.